Good afternoon, everybody. This is the recorded session of the Death of the 8-Hour Shift presentation. The world is changing and so should you. We are going to take about 35 minutes today to go through these details and look forward to getting this information to everybody out there. So, this is the Foundational Labor Strategies Death of the 8-Hour Shift presentation. We did record this for an earlier group, but we had a lot of questions that we thought would probably take up a lot of time for additional probably 15, 20 minutes that would not be necessary for those just wanting the recording. So want to jump through this stuff and get you the valuable material that we promised you. The first thing I want to cover is the Upstate Alliance did sponsor this, and so very briefly, they are the real estate experts, the network experts, business services. They really have the market research for anybody who's interested in locating a manufacturing facility in the Upstate. We have a lot of clients in this area. We know they do a great job. We've got several clients that have used them, and it is a good resource for everybody looking to place a manufacturing facility in the area. So brief joke for everybody. I really enjoyed my talk last year at Best Plants. I was about 2 minutes before the session, I showed up to the room, and a gentleman was standing there, and I said, "Hey, you going to join this session?" And he said, "This guy is going to be full of it," except he didn't say it. He used a word that rhymes with it. And I said, yeah, probably. And then I went up, put on my mic, and started talking. I tend to talk about issues that are, we'll call them a little bit cutting edge, a little bit new, and sometimes people give me the eye roll. So we're going to handle something that's actionable, that's happening now, and that should be relevant to every single person that listens to this recording. So after the session, when this person gave me a hard time, 92 people came up and gave us their business cards. And I was excited about that. I thought it was a big success. The challenge was their big interest was not the focus of my session. It was a small piece of my session around shifts, 8-hour shifts and 12-hour shifts. And that is why we wrote the article called The Death of the 8-Hour Shift, which handles a lot of issues. And we get towards the end of this discussion, we're going to get into the 8-hour shift problem. But in the beginning of this, I want to talk about things that relate to that, including the Affordable Care Act in a real way that will influence your decision making in the future, as well as true labor costs, which will also influence things like overtime, shift length, etc. So bear with me as we get to the 8-hour shift problem. The 12-hour shift was, again, really the thing that they were most excited about. We're applying best practices, and we talk about best practices a lot at Core Practice. One of the things that we've recognized more and more is a migration away from traditional Monday through Friday 8-hour shift scheduling, and that could be in manufacturing, mining, distribution, utilities, call centers. In all of these verticals where we have expertise, clients are telling us, and we're working with them to help everybody understand that the 8-hour shift is not the only option, and that there's great schedules out there that will attract high-skilled employees and make them want to stay at your facility. Where are the hidden costs? What are the things that we're trying to go after, that we're exploring with our customers and doing a lot of data analysis with? We're looking at things like high overtime. In food processing, sanitation is a big issue. The biggest thing that we hear complaints about from our customers, and the reason why they hire us, is they have an inability to staff efficiently for seasonal, monthly, weekly, or daily demand. And that could be seasonal or it could be variable, but they need flexible work schedules and they don't have them. So when you look at this list, there's a lot of things on here: outdated HR policies, idle labor time, uneven skills on shifts. Go through the list. We recommend that you print this slide out and that you sit down with your management team and say, what are the biggest issues for us? And if you just spend 10 minutes on it, I think you'd find it a very helpful focusing exercise that will help your team think about what's really important. There may be some emotional issues that are low-cost issues, but they're emotional for us. And then on the flip side, there may be some things that are not such big deals, at least on the surface, but they may be costing you millions of dollars. So this is a good first step into isolating what are the things we think are big issues for us. Starting with the Affordable Care Act, it has, as some people feared it would, driven up the cost of healthcare premiums. Now, there's other things driving those costs up as well. Generically, the cost of healthcare is going up too. But we're looking at healthcare benefits going up by about 7.5% in 2013, according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, and maybe more than that the year after. So it's a significant issue. It's one that you should all be aware of because it will dramatically affect how you staff your workforce. And we'll get into that in a couple of slides. But here's some headlines. Verizon takes big profit hit from benefit costs. Health insurance sticker shock. Employer healthcare cost to rise in 2013. Connecticut businesses fear rising healthcare costs. Dislike. So there's a lot being written about this. It's on the front line, but what people are failing to recognize is the key point in manufacturing and everywhere else, but this is a very important point in manufacturing. It's not should the government be involved or not be involved in our business. This is not a political discussion about the Affordable Care Act. Frankly, whether you like it or don't like it, I don't care. Okay? What you need to understand is the impact of this legislation on your business. Okay? So that is the piece that matters is when healthcare costs go up, what does that mean for staffing strategies for me? And we're going to talk about that directly. So can we attribute rising costs to the Affordable Care Act? Affordable Care Act was supposed to bring costs down. That was the promise. However, it's going up 7.5% in 2013. So reasons for rising costs of care provided. The fear of government regulation has really caused a knee-jerk reaction with healthcare providers, basically saying, hey, if the government's going to get involved in this, they're going to tell us that we can't deny pre-existing conditions and everybody's got to be insured. We want to raise the prices as fast and as furiously as we possibly can. So that's what's happening. The costs should go down or at least go up more slowly because the government oversight, they've said, listen, we've got these committees that are formed on a state-by-state basis, and if you want to raise your healthcare benefits by 10% or more, the cost of those benefits as a Blue Cross Blue Shield or a Cigna or somebody else, you've got to go in front of a committee that has to see why you want to raise those prices. The belief from a government perspective was that a healthier demographic would have to be insured. And so when you take healthier people and you put them into the population, the cost of care in general would go down. We're not seeing that, and it's probably because of the knee-jerk reaction from the healthcare companies and maybe not that philosophy is flawed. So again, we look at the three reasons for rising costs. The one that we really care about is that the Affordable Care Act is causing really a knee-jerk reaction, we would say, by healthcare providers, and that driving cost is creating a real challenge for manufacturers. I'm going to explain why, and maybe people haven't recognized this yet, but basically over the next 3 to 5 years, the 40-hour employee is going to become obsolete. There will not be a 40-hour employee anymore. And we're going to go through the details on why, but brace yourselves because the world is changing and it's changing rapidly and nobody else is talking about this. Okay, so we want to start the conversation with you. So there's 3 key components to true labor cost, or the fully loaded cost of one employee for 1 hour. You've got the average wage. In this example, I'm going to use $15. You've got burden, which is medical, dental, and all those fringe paid benefits that you have. I'm using 35%. That number is probably low for you if you're an established manufacturer. Your number is probably around 45 or 50%, but I'm going to be conservative. And then the pay ratio, which usually people after I give speeches have a question about what again is the pay ratio? The pay ratio is the total hours that you pay an employee for versus the hours they actually work. Okay, so the numerator takes into account all hours paid. The denominator only takes into account hours worked, which means this is where we cover things like paid time off, vacations, holidays, and other paid benefits. Okay, in this example, I'm using 15%. That should be about right. Sometimes we see 17%, but you should be close to 15%. So, cost of straight time, you've got your $15, you've got the 35% or 1.35, and you've got 15% or 1.15. And when you put all those together, the fully loaded cost is $23.29. So for one employee in a plant for 1 hour, we're paying $23.29 in pay and benefits. Now in overtime, you've got that $15. You certainly have time and a half. Here's where things start to get interesting. All those fixed cost benefits associated with burden, aside from taxes and 401k, go away. pay ratio goes away completely because you're not getting any extra vacations or holidays based on the fact you're working overtime. So it usually ends up only being about 10%, 7-8% for taxes, a couple of points for 401k matching, and that's it. Okay. So when we look at that number fully loaded for overtime, we're looking at $24.75. Okay. So as we move forward into the adverse cost of straight time, it is basically adverse costs are the costs associated with additional costs of the company. So if I have, if I'm worth $23.29 to the company and I work for 1 hour solidly, I give you $23.29 worth of benefit. You pay me $23.29 worth of pay and benefits, and it's a fair trade. It's a zero cost, zero sum game. Okay. What about idle time? What did it say? There's some breakage upstream from me, and there's nothing I can do for an hour. Well, for excuse me, for that hour, you pay me $23.29, but you don't get any value for my time. Right? I'm sitting there on the packaging line waiting for things to package. So you pay $23.29, and I don't give you any value. So the adverse cost is $23.29. Now, in overtime, let's say I've had an effective week, good 40 hours, and my manager comes up to me and says, listen, John, I'd like you to work an additional hour. We'll pay you the overtime, $24.75, but you got to work that additional hour. Well, I give them the $23.29 worth of my time, right? We said that I'm worth $23.29, but you've got to pay $24.75. So the adverse cost of overtime, or the additional cost of the company in this case, is only $1.46. So why does that matter? It matters because most companies have this fear of overtime. Overtime's a bad thing. Well, if idle time is about 16 times more expensive in this example, is it really a bad thing, or is idle time really the problem? And we'd argue that within reason on overtime, you're going to be in good shape. It's the idle time that is incredibly problematic and can sink the ship. So something to think about. Okay. Going to the next stage of this, getting more advanced. What happens when this burden number goes up? We talked about this 7.5% increase in healthcare benefits. A large part of your burden costs are medical, dental, all those health insurance costs, right? So when those numbers go up, the burden goes up and the adverse cost of overtime goes down. Guess what, everybody? The adverse cost of overtime, if it's not negative already for you, will be negative over the next 3 to 5 years. Okay, so I gave you the kind of 3 to 5 year warning when we started this. That's the warning. Okay, if overtime is cheaper than straight time at your facility, your managers are going to have to use incredible restraint to not say, hey, let's really do a major headcount reduction and have people work 60 hours a week. We know that productivity is there. We know that the health and safety issues are there. You've got to be incredibly careful as you look at these numbers. Okay, it's not you get to work all the overtime you want. It's we understand that it's an effective, affordable tool when used within reason. Okay, so these are the numbers we had before. You can staff at the peak, which is the red line, where you've got a ton of idle time, but probably no overtime unless there's some short-term unexcused absences. Or you can staff at the bottom. Minimum staffing means you're going to have high amounts of overtime and maybe too much. Okay. Well, if we look at this from a financial perspective, using the numbers that I showed earlier, if I staff at the peak, it's over $3 million in costs versus $175,000 if I staff at the trough. Okay, so that's a major difference, almost $3 million difference in this particular example. Now, if I look at the financial low-cost option, it's not just to staff at the bottom and to say, hey, you get to work all the overtime you want, which is a bad plan. It's to staff somewhere above that trough, really on a 16-to-1 basis, right? That was the ratio, 16-to-1 overtime to idle time. So basically, that's what we're looking at, okay? And in this example, again, only looking financially, not looking at the health and safety implications, we can get to $146,000, $147,000 in adverse costs by staffing somewhere slightly above the trough, okay, and using a lot of overtime. But we talked about those benefit costs rising. So again, as I get up to about a 9% increase in my benefit costs or my burden costs, that's where in this example, I go negative, okay? My overtime becomes cheaper than my straight time. So really excited about how this is going to change your workforce. Excited in kind of a nervous way though, right? Because this is going to change the way management teams think. Now, this is a reality today, but you don't want to wait 3 to 5 years for your management teams to figure this out. Okay? They need to figure it out today. They should have figured it out a year ago. So let's get them educated about this, get them ready to make decisions and be actionable around this particular topic. So we showed you the chart and we said, hey, look, low cost is 146,900, staffing slightly above the trough. Well, not anymore. As those healthcare costs continue to go up, Affordable Care Act continues to be an issue. What do we see happening? Adverse cost of overtime is negative. Now where's the low cost place to staff? Unfortunately, just from a financial modeling perspective, it says staff as few people as possible, use all the overtime you want, and you'll always save money, assuming productivity, health, and safety stay the same, which we know isn't the case. But again, the financial models can make people make some pretty bad decisions. So be aware of that. What about overtime? Do they even want to work it, right? Here's an example. The normative database, over 100,000 shift workers from North America, including Canada. In the light purple, there's a client as a representative example next to that. But if we just focus on the norms, 28% of employees say they're working more overtime than they would like. So if you happen to fall in that 28%, you don't really care what the adverse costs are. You don't want it, and it's going to be a problem. What about working less overtime than you'd like? It's about 38% there. And for those 38%, a lot of them would say, hey, I'll work all the overtime you can give me. They'll work to an unhealthy and unsafe place. They don't really care. They just want all the overtime they can get. And then working the right amount of overtime, there's a good chunk of people, around 34%, that feel that way. So we've never met the average shift worker. These are norms which imply averages. And what we highly recommend you do is really understand what your employees like and don't like, and then design your labor strategies partially based on that, partially based on the business requirements, and find that healthy balance. Okay. But if your employees don't like overtime, we've got other strategies that we can help you with, but this may not be the right one. What happens when employees work less than 40 hours? A lot of our clients say, hey, we don't really have idle time. When there's equipment downtime, we send the employees home. It doesn't cost us anything. And we beg to differ. When you send an employee home, you're not cutting their vacations and holidays or taking away their health care benefits. Those are things that you're still paying for. So when you send them home, you may be paying them $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour to sit on the couch. Okay? It's a reality. You need to be aware that sending people home when there's no work is not free. It's cheaper than having them stand there and do nothing, but you want to be in a situation where you don't need to send people home very often. Instead, you're staffed lean and mean, and you're more worried about how do I flex up with the right amount of overtime, right, and taking advantage of that adverse cost situation. So this is a very ugly chart, but it tells the story. The light green line going from left to right, it goes from 45 to 30, that's hours. So if I'm at 45 hours to 41 hours, I pay $24.75, that adverse cost of overtime, with the fully loaded cost of overtime, excuse me. When I get to 40 hours, I pay the fully loaded cost of straight time, $23.29. And as I work less than 40 hours, that number starts to climb, right? $23.96 when you're at 37 hours. When you get to 30 hours, it's $26.05 per hour if I'm only working 30 hours, using the example from what we had before. That's almost $3 more expensive on a per hour basis. So what it's really saying is that you're going to end up spending a lot of money having people sit at home on the couch, okay? Be very careful with this, okay? What we are suggesting you do, again, is instead of staffing with a ton of people, being a little leaner on people, so when you don't have as much volume, you don't have to send as many people home, and focusing more on overtime. How about employees willing to work fewer hours, like a part-time or seasonal schedule? So if we want to flex them down, what would that do to morale? Less than 10% of employees feel like part-time or seasonal options are good for them. So you don't have a lot of full-time employees these days that actually want it anyway. I'm showing this slide one more time only to say, here's a blank one. If you want a copy of this, you can certainly email us. It's fred@corepractice.com, FRED@CORE as in Edward, practice.com. And Fred will send you a copy of this slide deck if you'd like it. But we put a blank one in here so you can use it as a worksheet with your own numbers. So I took a poll when we did this live on the webinar today, and we asked everybody, would you prefer to work this schedule or this one? And I'll walk through both of them with you now, and obviously we can't do the poll now, but I'll share those results after I explain what they are. if you're a day shift employee, would you like to work 8-hour shifts Monday through Friday and get every weekend off? That means you work 260 days a year, you get 104 days off, 52 weekends off, so all your weekends, and you never work more than 5 shifts in a row. Okay, so that's an 8-hour shift, very common, everybody knows what it is. Or would you prefer a 12-hour shift? On a 12-hour shift, instead of working 260 days a year, you only work 173, so you get an 87 more days off a year, 87 more days off, 191 days off a year. All your weekends are still off just like the 8s, but a third of your weekends are 6-day weekends. So you get 17 extra 6-day weekends a year, and you never work more than 3 shifts in a row. I'll explain how this works. You work Monday to Wednesday in week 1, and then you get Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday off. You work Wednesday to Friday, and you get the weekend off. You work 2, get a day off. That's the honey-do day, right? We get all your chores done. You work 2 days, and then you get your weekend off again. Okay? So we polled everybody on this call, and 92% of the people polled said they'd prefer the 12-hour shift. Well, that's an important number because if you're a 5-day operation right now, we're guessing you're an 8-hour or 10-hour shift operation. Well, maybe 12-hour shifts can give you a continuous operation 5 days a week, and it's something that could also be really good for your employees. I'm not assuming that you have all those needs, but the 12-hour shift might be incredibly attractive. 92% of the people on there, again, said that they would prefer that over the 8s. So why is the 8-hour shift dying? So we talked about the death of that 8-hour shift as a title, right? The reason why we call it that is because of a couple things. One is it's very hard to be flexible with 8-hour shifts, okay? It's harder to work overtime and to get that seasonal and variable demand. It's also that you're working 260 work days each year versus 173. So you get 87 more days off with the 12s. On 8-hour shifts, overtime often means working the weekends. So you might work 6 or 7 days a week with no days off versus 12s where you can work 48 hours and still get a 3-day weekend. Higher gas prices for commuting. Probably if you commute, let's say 45 minutes each way to work, you could probably save $1,500 on gas each year, which is a major cost saving because you're going to come fewer times to work on the 12, so just work longer shifts. The opportunity for overtime with 8-hour shifts, as I said earlier, is less than 12s, and it's because there's already people working your 3 shifts Monday through Friday typically, and so the only place to flex out is on the weekends, whereas on 12s you can work on your days off during the week, the weekends, etc. So somebody wrote an article, or really a letter to the editor for Industry Week based on the article that I published called The Death of the 8-Hour Shift, and they said, this guy John Fraze is crazy. And they had 5 key points that they wanted to make. Number 1, the 12-hour shift is just too long. They increase mistakes. And we know for a fact that that is not true. Most mistakes happen in the first and last hour of the shift, no matter what length the shift is. And if you're on an 8-hour shift, there's 3 shifts a day versus 2 shifts on 12s. So fundamentally, we're going to have fewer first and last hours where mistakes can happen. Fewer shift changes, fewer breaks and lunches. And because of that, again, we really see fewer mistakes. No one wants to work the weekend, so let's just build enough inventory Monday through Friday. This person obviously did not have a background in business because not only is that financially impossible for most companies these days, but there's a lot more of just-in-time world that we're dealing with, and it's just not a philosophy that works for anybody. Plus capacity. Why don't we just buy more equipment, right? It's crazy. The weekend warrior could cover the weekend requirement if it was necessary. So if we have to do this weekend stuff, let's just hire a bunch of other people to do it. Yeah, they're going to be low skilled. It's probably a second job for them. There's going to be high turnover, high scrap, but at least we won't have to do it. So I've seen this work really well only at one place, and it was at Airstream Trailers. But if you're looking at the typical manufacturer, the weekend warrior, having somebody work 12-hour shifts Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that's it, is a no-go. It's a bad idea, and it comes with a lot of baggage. So that's false. Your health is worse if you work a 12-hour shift. That is absolutely false. Your health is worse if you work 6 12-hour shifts or 5 12-hour shifts on a regular basis, 60 or 72 hours. But in shift work, the health issue really comes down to night shift. So if I'm a night shift employee, I've got a 5 times increase of gastroenterological issues like stomach cancer. I have an increased chance of breast cancer. You know, those are the kinds of challenges we're talking about, and they're night shift related, melatonin-based issues that are really being researched in the last 3-4 years more heavily than they have been in the past. And I think we're going to learn more about that in the future. part of the reason these health issues exist on third shift, though, is that these people are exhausted. When they get home from work, they don't say, let's go spend 2 hours at the gym working out. Some do, but not all of them. And then certainly there's issues with at 3 in the morning, is the all-you-can-eat garden spot open for a salad? Or am I doing a double cheeseburger and a big gulp at the gas station, right? And we're seeing more of those unhealthy eating habits on third shift, mostly because of what's available to the employees. And then you need to staff more people to utilize 12-hour shifts, which is absolutely false, mathematically incorrect. You don't need to utilize more staff. You need the same amount based on the total hours that the individual works and the total hours of coverage. It shouldn't be an issue at all. So again, we said on 8s, you flex out to a 6th or 7th day of work, giving you very little time off or days off. Versus 12s where, yeah, I can flex out to the weekends and still get a lot of days off, but I can also utilize overtime during the week if I want to increase density of my staffing, right? If I want to increase the number of employees that I've got on an individual day, like a Tuesday, or bring up another line or fill in for vacations. Those are very easy things to do with more flexible shift schedules like 12-hour shifts. So when we talk about 7-day options, okay, this is traditionally where people start to lean towards 12-hour shifts. They don't on 5 days, which I think is a big mistake. Not that 12-hour shifts is the only answer, but to rule it out before working with the employees is what we're talking about here. But on 7 days, the 8-hour shift that I'm showing you now is something called the Southern Swing. Okay, if it rotates days, afternoons, and nights, it's called the Southern Swing. This is a modified version of that, where there's no rotation, days, afternoons, nights. You just rotate your day on, day off pattern. Basically, you work 7 in a row 3 times over 4 weeks. You work 273 days a year. You get 91 days off. You only get 1/4 of your weekends off. Yeah, they're 3-day weekends, but it only happens 25% of the time. And you work 7 in a row again 3 times over 4 weeks. So when you look at 7 days, this is really the only viable option on 8-hour shifts without giving people a bunch of individual days off, which would on a second or a third shift would be an absolute nightmare, right? It is very unattractive for somebody on third shift to say, I work 3 nights, I get a day off. I work 2 nights and I get a day off. It's just not very attractive. So people have been driven towards 12-hour shifts, not because they love 12-hour shifts, but because it's a better alternative than the 8-hour shift for a lot of shift workers. So on the 12-hour shifts, doing the same amount of coverage, we end up looking at, working a Tuesday and a Wednesday and getting 2 days off, working 3 days, getting 2 days off, working 2 days and then getting a 3-day weekend. So in this example, a little bit of overtime's built in, but you work half the time and you play half the time. 182 days of work and 182 days off. I get 26 weekends off, so instead of 25% of my weekends off, I get 50% of my weekends off. And my longest break is 3 days, so every other weekend is a 3-day weekend. It's like every other weekend is Memorial Day weekend. So I get a lot of those days off, and I never work more than 3 shifts in a row. Some people say, hey, listen, I don't mind 12s, but I don't want to work 4 or 5 of them in a row. In those cases, this might be the right option for them. For people that don't mind working 4 in a row, there's one that gets you even more days off in a row. Okay, so if I work Monday through Thursday, I get Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday off. I get 7 days off in a row. The kind of flexibility to have people come in and work on their days off here, to bring up capacity or to fill in for people on their days off, this really becomes exciting because they've got so many days off, just like the one before, 182 days off every year instead of 104 or 91 in the example with a bit of overtime. They still get half their weekends off here, but they get 13 extra weeks off a year. This is before vacations and holidays. And they never work more than 4 in a row. Okay, so there's some exciting things that can happen here with 12-hour shifts as well. And this is one of the things that's killing off that 8-hour shift. Going back, if it was between working 7 in a row 3 times over 4 weeks or working 4 12s or 3 12s and getting an extra 13 weeks off a year, the 12s tend to be more popular. And I think you can see why. Yes, it's a long day, but I'm getting an awful lot of days off. Same amount of work time. We're working the same amount of time. Same amount of time off. It's just cut up differently. So, to finish, really, and we took a lot of questions in the last group. If you have questions, please email me. I'd be happy to email you. Email Fred, and he'll make sure that information gets to me, John Fraze. We talked a little bit about technology. And just to say that 3-4 years ago, we wouldn't tell you to go out and look at workforce management solutions for manufacturing. The contact center is got it all. They've got a perfectly mature product suite there, scheduling, analytics, activities. They can measure and monitor everything. These days, manufacturing is enjoying that same evolution. There is scheduling analytics activities and other really interesting pieces of technology. We don't sell technology, so I'm not here to promote it to try and get you to buy something. But we highly recommend that you're out there doing your homework. You're talking to people like Kronos. You're talking to those types of vendors and saying, hey, is there something that you have that can help us solve the $1 million problem? And I think you'll be surprised at what you see. Okay, so we talked about the hidden costs. This is just to remind you, overtime is not your problem. Now, if you abuse it, it could be a health and safety or a productivity problem. We want you to focus on idle time. The next 3 to 5 years are going to dramatically change how you use your people. And if they don't, they should. Okay, so you need to think about it now and get ready, because when overtime goes negative for you, if it's not there already, it's going to be a philosophical shift in the United States. Again, the 8-hour shift isn't the only option. I say it's a death of the 8-hour shift. It's really sick. It's kind of on life support, but it's not dead yet. And I want to thank you all for attending. My contact information is here. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can go to Fred. You can email me, certainly. Fred tends to be the best resource just because he's at his desk where I'm sitting on airplanes half the time. But thank you all again, and we hope you found this useful today. Take care.